이야기도 많고 좀 많이 쓰고 싶은데 그렇게 아주 열심히 쓰지 못했다라는 생각이 들어요. 그래서 아주 시원하게 한번 쉬어보지도 못했다라는 생각도 들고 그렇습니다. 앞으로 뭐 할 수 있는 데까지 열심히 써야죠. 그리고 한번 푹 쉬어보게요.
In our headlines on this Tuesday, July 8th, here in South Korea, at the White House, Donald Trump extends his pause on country-specific tariffs from July 9th to August 1st after sending notifications to a number of American trade partners, including South Korea. And the Lee Jae-myung administration points to the extended time frame for tariff talks with the U.S. as the president's security advisor continues his high-level interactions with U.S. officials. Meanwhile, capital Seoul is noting its hottest day of the year thus far as the temperature soars to as high as 36 degrees Celsius, and health experts warn against outdoor activities. The relief is that the July deadline of the pause on country-specific U.S. tariffs has been extended to August 1st. The regret is that South Korea is among the American trade partners to have received a letter unilaterally informing it of a 25% tariff. Our Moon Ji-young has details.
U.S. President Donald Trump signed an executive order on Monday extending the effective date for reciprocal tariff to August 1st, pushing back the previous July 9th deadline. Trump outlined the rates in letters to the leaders of countries, including South Korea and Japan, via Truth Social earlier on Monday, with rates ranging from 25% to 40%. Trump originally unveiled the tariff in April, but granted a 90-day reprieve so that countries could strike trade agreements.
I have the signed letters that went out to both South Korea and Japan today, and there will be approximately 12 other countries that will receive notifications and letters directly from the President of the United States.
In the letter, Trump threatened to impose 25% duties on South Korea, with higher duties for items deemed to have been transshipped through Korea from other countries. Trump stated that the relationship between Seoul and Washington has been, quote, far from reciprocal. He warned that any retaliatory tariff from Seoul would result in an additional surcharge on top of the 25%. However, Trump did leave open the possibility of an adjustment to the tariff rate for South Korea. The South Korean government views Trump's letter as an effective extension of the pause on new duties for Korean products. Seoul has been actively working to avoid or minimize the impact of these steep levies, as well as other tariffs on products such as automobiles, steel, and aluminum. According to Reuters, these reciprocal tariffs are separate from the sector-specific levies. In a press release, Seoul's trade ministry stated that South Korea will seek to address the trade deficit issue, a major concern of the U.S., by improving domestic rules and regulations. It also affirmed its commitment to creating opportunities in core industries through the two countries' partnership for manufacturing renaissance. Moon Ji-young, Arirang News.
In related news, the presidential office convened a meeting this afternoon to address the latest developments on the U.S. tariff front. For details on this, I have our correspondent Song Yoo-jin standing by live. Yoo-jin, welcome. So what has the top office said?
Right, so good afternoon, Sunny. It's certainly been a busy day here at the presidential office because, as you know, trade talks with Washington have been one of President Lee Jae-myung's top priorities. Now today, presidential spokesperson Kang Yoo-jung said that the administration sees value in the fact that they have a bit more time for negotiations and talks before the tariffs actually take effect. First, take a listen.
Given how little time there has been after the new administration was launched, we see it as having avoided the worst-case scenario of tariffs going up. We've now secured extra time for negotiations, and National Security Advisor Ri Seong-rak is continuing high-level talks in the U.S.
Now, in response to President Trump's latest announcement, Presidential Chief of Policy Kim Yong-bum convened a meeting this afternoon with the Ministries of Industry, Finance, and Foreign Affairs. Kim emphasized that although swift negotiations are important, safeguarding South Korea's national interests remain the highest priority and urged the ministries to approach talks with the U.S. with that in mind. Now, regarding the potential impact of the tariffs, Kim said market reactions have so far been relatively calm, but ordered close monitoring of exports and the broader economy. He also directed ministries to implement support measures for sectors likely to be affected, including autos and steel. Now, Kim added that once National Security Advisor Ri Seong-rak returns from Washington, they will hold a joint meeting to review the situation and discuss next steps.
Right, and speaking about that, could you tell us a bit more about the agenda of the top security advisor there in the U.S., Eugene?
Right. So South Korea's National Security Advisor Lee met with his American counterpart Marco Rubio on Monday local time. Now, according to the presidential office, the South Korean delegation, including Lee, once again reiterated the need to arrange a summit between Presidents Lee and Trump as soon as possible to make progress on key issues, to which the U.S. side agreed. Now, on tariffs specifically, Washington expressed hopes to reach a deal before the 25% duty kicks in. Now, I also want to note that on the same day, South Korea's top trade negotiator Yo Han-gu, who is also in Washington, met with Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. There, Yo called for lowering tariffs on major Korean exports to the U.S., mainly automobiles and steel, which are currently subject to separate tariffs of 25% and 50% respectively under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. Yo also emphasized Seoul's commitment to bilateral cooperation and manufacturing, describing it as a way to achieve more balanced trade, which is one of the main reasons why President Trump is pushing for this trade war. Yo and Lutnick are scheduled to continue their talks on Wednesday local time, while Wee's visit to Washington is scheduled to wrap up on Tuesday, so we're expecting more details to come out once he returns to Seoul. That's all I have for now. Back to you, Sunny.
All right, Eugene, thank you for the coverage. That was our Song Eugene reporting from the presidential office. Moving on then, a state-run think tank finds economic prospects for South Korea continue to appear challenging as the construction industry remains in the doldrums while external risk factors persist. Our Park Junan covers the latest findings.
The Korea Development Institute reported on Tuesday that South Korea's economy remained subdued, grappling with persistent weaknesses in construction and manufacturing, alongside rising trade uncertainties stemming from U.S. tariff pressure. This assessment was according to the monthly economic trends report released by the state-run think tank. Notably, production in May was hampered by a prolonged contraction in the construction sector, specifically a 20.8% year-on-year decline. The construction industry is considered a key pillar of domestic demand in South Korea, with a slowdown in the sector potentially weighing heavily on the broader economy.
Construction is closely tied to domestic demand as it creates jobs and stimulates demand for building materials and nearby restaurants. So when the construction industry slows, that weakness ripples through the broader domestic economy.
Despite the domestic downturn, semiconductor production grew by 18.1% in May. Also, investment in related equipment sustained high growth of 7.5%. However, overall exports to the U.S. underperformed, growing only 1.9%, primarily due to a 16.1% drop in motor vehicle exports, driven by steep U.S. tariffs on automobiles. Given that the United States is one of South Korea's largest export destinations, an economic expert notes that rising tariff tensions may hurt the Korean economy.
I believe the impact of tariff uncertainty on the Korean economy is significant. If the 25% tariff is implemented, it will become more difficult for Korean businesses to export to the U.S. market. As exports decline, wage earners in export-related industries could face job insecurity.
However, the KDI pointed to signs of improved stability in the credit market and domestic consumption. It cited the benchmark Kospi's notable rise in June, a slight dollar depreciation, and policy expectations under the new president as factors behind improved investor sentiment. The institute also emphasized that a gradual easing of high interest rates and stimulus measures in the second supplementary budget aimed at boosting domestic consumption are likely to support a recovery in spending. 박준환, Arirang News.
Today, capital Seoul is enduring the hottest day of the year thus far, and health experts are warning against prolonged outdoor activity. Our Pyongyang was out and about.
Seoul is experiencing extreme heat, with Tuesday marking the hottest day of the year so far.
During the daytime, the temperature in Seoul can get higher than 36 degrees Celsius.
Seoul experienced its 9th consecutive tropical night on Monday, meaning that the nighttime lows do not drop lower than 25 degrees. South Korea's weather agency issued the season's first heat wave warning for all parts of Seoul on Monday, 18 days earlier than last year. The heat wave warning remains in effect for a second day on Tuesday, issued when perceived temperatures hit 35 degrees Celsius or higher for 2 days, or when severe heat-related damage is expected. For those in Seoul, the heat is more than just a nuisance.
I'm working outside, and it's so hot, I feel like I'm going to melt. It's very hot. I want to go to the seaside.
I didn't feel it when I was driving this morning, but now I'm really feeling the heat. I've got a tan because I was recently on vacation, but now I'm kind of worried about my health and things like skin cancer.
Tuesday's temperatures climbed to over 37 degrees, marking the hottest day in early July since weather-related data began being recorded in 1907, breaking a 118-year record. The intense heat nationwide has also led to a sharp rise in heat-related illnesses. According to the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency, 875 cases were reported as of Sunday, up 83% from the same period last year. Data also revealed that 7 people have died from heat stroke since May 15th, more than double the number of deaths recorded in 2024. Pyongyang, Arirang News.
In other news, President Lee Jae-myung ushered in South Korea's first K-Defense Day earlier on this Tuesday with a call on his cabinet to consider the creation of a control tower to further nurture the defense industry. At a cabinet meeting, he also requested a review into prospects of setting up a regular strategy meeting to boost arms exports. In essence, the president urged pan-governmental efforts to ultimately rank South Korea among the world's top 4 defense powerhouses. The World Heritage Committee has rejected a review into Japan's commitment to the disclosure of accurate historical records at its UNESCO-listed industrial sites where many Koreans were forced into wartime labor. Our foreign affairs correspondent Oh Soo-young reports.
South Korea has voiced strong regret after a UNESCO committee rejected its proposal to review Japan's handling of wartime forced labor sites, including Hiroshima coal mine near Nagasaki. On Monday's annual session of the UNESCO World Heritage Committee in Paris, South Korea proposed a formal agenda to assess whether Japan had fulfilled its 2015 promise to acknowledge the use of Korean forced labor at its Meiji-era industrial sites. But Japan submitted a counter-proposal to delete the item, which was passed with 7 votes in favour, 3 opposing and 8 abstentions. The 21-member committee allows motions to pass with just 6 votes in favour. In 2015, Japan pledged to take steps to present the full historical context of 23 industrial sites, including forced labour under its colonial rule, as a condition for having them listed as UNESCO World Heritage Sites. However, Tokyo has failed to follow through on this pledge. Japan placed the Industrial Heritage Information Center in Tokyo, not Nagasaki, and failed to mention forced mobilization or discrimination against Korean laborers. This year, Nagasaki produced a virtual reality video to mark the 10th anniversary of the site's listing, but again omitted the history of forced labor, prompting further criticism. Some 57,900 Koreans were forced to work at 7 of Japan's registered sites during its colonial rule of Korea in the early 20th century. In 2021, UNESCO adopted a decision expressing strong regret over Japan's inadequate follow-up and urged it to uphold its commitment. 2 years later, the committee called on Japan to consult with concerned countries and produce new and enhanced measures on historical interpretation for review by December 2024. However, Tokyo decided to file an update instead of a proper report, which would be subject to a committee review. The World Heritage Committee has reviewed Japan's industrial sites every 2 to 3 years through progress reports. Thus, South Korea has stressed UNESCO has a duty to monitor implementation of its decisions. All member states under the World Heritage Convention have the right to raise concerns and request formal reviews. Japan pays the third largest amount of contributions to UNESCO's annual budget. Observers say this boosts its influence within the organization. South Korea says it will keep urging Tokyo to fulfill its international commitments while working to build forward-looking cooperation based on mutual trust. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
U.S. President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sat down for closed-door talks at the White House on Monday. Addressing members of the media, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt revealed that the ceasefire proposal supported by Israel had been delivered to Hamas and that the release of all hostages is Mr. Trump's top priority. Now, separately, during a dinner later in the day, the Israeli leader gave his American counterpart a copy of a letter that he had sent to the Nobel Prize Committee nominating Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. This marks Prime Minister Netanyahu's third visit to the U.S. during the second Trump administration. Back here on the local front, South Korean drug regulators have approved the world's first recombinant anthrax vaccine developed by researchers here. Our Park Gonu reports.
Made in Korea. That's a term describing the world's first recombinant anthrax vaccine, which is said to be manufactured in a plant in Hwasungun County in the southwest of South Korea, after decades of joint research between the public and private sectors. The Arirang vaccine uses recombinant protein technology, minimizing the toxic side effects of other conventional vaccines. For years, Korea had to rely on expensive imports for anthrax vaccines, but now that's starting to change. This homegrown vaccine isn't just set to be made in Korea, but will be the result of nearly 3 decades of accumulated research and technology. The vaccine was approved by the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety in April and is expected to be produced later this year. The Hwasun facility alone can produce up to 10 million doses annually, helping ensure a stable supply. However, there were challenges to developing a first-of-its-kind product.
Because this was the first recombinant anthrax vaccine, there were no established guidelines. We had to create and verify the evaluation standards step by step.
She stressed the importance of this immunization tool in national preparedness, especially to respond to global health crises, including bioterrorism. She added that those working in high-risk sectors, including lab researchers, military personnel, police and firefighters, are being considered as priority groups for vaccination. While the product didn't go through a phase 3 clinical trial due to ethical constraints, there have been concerns regarding its safety.
We couldn't go through a full phase 3 clinical trial, but we confirmed safety through non-clinical tests with rabbits.
He added that rabbits are sensitive to anthrax and require high levels of neutralizing antibodies, which adds weight to the test results. He also said the shot is expected to be competitively priced, and rising global demand is widely opening possibilities for exports. From a country once reliant on foreign supply, Korea is now positioning itself as an exporter. And with this step toward vaccine self-reliance, expectations are rising for the future of K-vaccines. Park Gonu, Arirang News, Hwasun.
Meanwhile, Spain is the stage of South Korea's cultural program this year, and a recent dynamic performance in Madrid has become the talk of the town for touching upon the bilateral interest in dance as a form of universal expression. Our Choi Soo-young was there.
Spain is a country renowned for its dance and passion. And in its capital, Madrid, stands the cultural landmark, the Matadero Art Theatre. There, a special performance unfolded, blending the past and present of Korean dance. A dancer walked through a dream. Traditional Korean sounds, pansori, 장구, and jing, filled the space, setting the stage for a soulful dance. The swishing of hanji, Korean traditional paper, mimicked the sounds of waves, telling people what Korean dance is. Modern styles like b-boy, hip-hop, and street dance also caught the eye. Through intense movements, dancers told stories of conflict in modern society, showing how far Korean contemporary dance has come. The final stage brought a dynamic mix of tradition and modern emotion, full of color and energy. And in the encore, the entire audience danced together in Korean folk song Gangang-sulre, the circle dance, as one, a true moment of cultural harmony.
The dancers, the body language, the expression. At first I thought I would not understand because we've come from different cultures. We have maybe different artistic languages, but it was so enjoyable. The expression and the story was super clear.
The performance was amazing. It was a mix between what you can know about contemporary dance and things you didn't know about Korean, but you can interpret or think about.
Since 2022, South Korea's Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism has selected one country each year with strong potential for spreading Korean culture, offering a year-long series of cultural programs on site. This year, Spain was chosen. On Friday, July 4th, the performance titled A Dance Between Cultures showcased the spirit of the 2025 Korea season. Featuring acclaimed Korean teams recognized both at home and at international festivals like the Edinburgh Fringe, the event brought Korea and Spain together through dance.
Koreans and Spaniards both love music and dance. Through sharing that energy, it's a great way to connect emotions and open hearts. We wanted to show performances that people would want to see again even years later, with a more open mind and a positive mindset.
Spain's cultural scene also said why dance plays such an important role in helping Spain understand Korea.
Very funny, we are so far, but we have the same system to protect our identity through the culture, through the tradition, through the idea to move the tradition to another way to be, to express. So the past and the future, always together, always dancing together.
Under the theme, Two Cultures, One Heart, the performance blended Korean traditional and contemporary dance with Spanish artistry, marking up half a highlight of this year's Korea season. Choi Soo-young, Arirang News, Madrid.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. Former Russian Transport Minister Roman Starovoyt was found dead near Moscow on Monday, following his dismissal earlier the same day. 53-year-old Starovoyt was discovered with a gunshot wound in his car just hours after President Putin fired him in a presidential decree, with suicide believed to be the cause of death. No explanations were given regarding the reasons behind the dismissal. Starovoyt's removal came amid a corruption probe linked to allegations of embezzling approximately $246 million that were allocated for border fortifications, as well as criticism following disruptive drone attacks that grounded flights. Investigators are conducting a criminal probe to determine the exact cause of his death. Poland has temporarily reinstated border controls with Germany and Lithuania as of Monday, aiming to stop a reported surge in undocumented migration, particularly after violent incidents involving foreign nationals. However, the border controls have led to concerns of traffic jams at border crossings. 800 police officers, 200 border officials, and 500 soldiers have been deployed across 52 checkpoints on the German border and 13 checkpoints on the Lithuanian border. The move follows Germany's own strengthened border checks since 2023. Poland's prime minister says the controls are necessary to prevent Germany from returning migrants to Polish territory without oversight. Finally, Paris reopened 3 designated swimming sites along the Seine River for the first time in over a century on Saturday following a major cleanup tied to the 2024 Olympics. The 3 locations are near the Eiffel Tower, Notre Dame, and the National Library. Officials confirm that the water is being tested daily to make sure it is safe. The river had been closed off since 1923 as it was too polluted to swim in safely. However, Paris invested $1.5 billion into cleaning up the river to ensure it was Olympic ready in 2024. 1,000 visitors will be allowed in each swimming site each day until the end of August. 최지희, Arirang News.
Today, Seoul recorded the hottest temperature this year, with daytime temperatures soaring up to 36 degrees Celsius under heat wave warning. If the temperature reaches 37 degrees, it is likely to be the hottest day in early July ever recorded in Seoul. The East Coast and the coastal areas of the Gyeongsang-do provinces, which were hotter than human body temperature until yesterday, are expected to be able to get out of the scorching heat for a while from today. In particular, the temperature on the East Coast, including Gangneung, is expected to drop below 30 degrees Celsius from today and stay under 30 degrees until later this week. Tomorrow morning, Seoul will start warm at around 27 degrees, Daejeon and Busan 24 degrees. Daily highs will go up to 34 degrees in Chuncheon, 35 degrees in Daejeon. Severe heat waves and tropical nights in the western parts of the country are expected to continue until later this week. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. As always, thank you for watching, and do stay tuned for our panel session.
Arirang TV is conducting an overseas TV viewer survey to provide you with a better global broadcast service. Share your valuable feedback on the Arirang TV website www.arirang.com or mobile application. Survey participants will be selected at random to receive special gifts. 2025 Arirang Overseas TV Viewer Survey. We look forward to hearing from you.
우린 각자 다른 시간을 건너 서로의 행운이 되기까지 아쉬운 뿐인 시간 속에서 서로의 어른이 되기까지 even if I'm honestly, I'm hiding. 무조건 사랑해줘. 무조건 응원해줘. 더 바라는
President Lee Jae-myung is hoping to renew dialogue with Pyongyang to ensure risk reduction on the Korean peninsula. We have more on Press Perspective today. Hello and welcome. You're watching Press Perspective for this Tuesday, July 8th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. South Korea wants to renew dialogue. North Korea appears disinterested. Pundits for their part believe such cross-border interactions look unlikely, that is, for now. For more, I have Chun Soram, a former RFA reporter here in the studio. Soram, it's been a while. Welcome back.
Glad to be back.
I also have Chloe Bongno, a correspondent for French broadcaster France 24. Chloe, it's good to have you here.
Hello, it's nice. Thank you for having me.
Right, Soram, we will start with you. President Lee Jae-myung's appointments for unification, foreign and defense ministers are seen as strong indications of his intentions to engage with North Korea. First of all, do remind us a bit about the appointments for these three posts, and do you agree with this assessment by analysts?
So President Lee Jae-myung has named key cabinet members, and these choices are already sparkling discussion on what direction his leadership would take in terms of North Korea policy. So although they are still nominees and waiting for the confirmation hearings next week, their background and early remarks offer insight into the administration's priorities. For Unification Minister nominee, Chung Dong-young is a familiar face. He served in the same role nearly 2 decades ago under President Roh Moo-hyun, and he was a key player during the peak of Sunshine Policy era. He has expressed strong support for reviving the Unification Ministry's influence and even changing its name to better reflect a new direction rooted in peaceful engagement. Foreign Affairs nominee Cho Hyun is a career diplomat who served as South Korea's ambassador to the UN. He has been cautious but clear about North Korea issues. Tough issues like North Korea require careful diplomacy and efforts to find common ground. He could play a key role if dialogue between US and the North Korea resumes. Defense nominee Ang Kyu-baek is a 5-term lawmaker and a rare civilian nominee for defense minister. He brings deep ties to both the military and opposition party and could be a steady hand in military reform, including issues tied to inter-Korean relations. So in short, yes, this appointment, especially for unification, suggests President Lee Jae-myung is building a national security team geared toward engagement with measured and experienced voices. However, as the national interest points out that this may not be enough if Pyongyang remains unwilling to talk.
Right, and staying with that, Chloe, many scholars do believe that North Korea will rebuff efforts by South Korea for engagement. That being said, first, do remind us about the factors that will keep Kim Jong-un away from the negotiating table. And again, what are your suggestions with regard to some factors that can be used to coax him back to the talking table?
Yeah, so what could keep him away? The first thing, obviously, is the strategic shift that the North Korean side have taken since 2019. That was the last time that North Korea was voluntarily engaging in negotiation with the US. Trump at the time, Trump 1.0, let's say, and South Korea was also at the table of negotiation. That was the last time. Since then, there's been a very strong strategic shift because 2024, we saw Kim Jong-un ask to abandon the goal of reunification. It's quite important thing because it has been a 70-year-old policy to have the two Koreas reunified. That was one of the strong bones of the Juche doctrine that was set up by Kim Il-sung. So the fact that he decided to abandon that and to call South Korea an hostile state was a very strong point and a very strong turn in the way the two Koreas can talk together and have a dialogue. There's another thing that would keep him away is the question of nuclear question. So if South Korea comes in speaking about total denuclearization of the peninsula, which has always been the goal for now and is also the goal from Donald Trump,
we know now that the fact that North Korea is a nuclear state is in their constitution. It's also obviously a doctrine, a way for the regime to stay in North Korea, to stay strong. It's kind of a life insurance of a sort. So we can imagine that Kim Jong-un will not want to come to a table of negotiation if denuclearization is the key point. And the last thing on that point is their close bond with Russia. Bonds that are getting stronger and stronger at the moment because of the war in Ukraine, the fact that North Korea is sending troops. We know that the two countries are getting closer and getting more and more mutual benefits from each other. So because of that, there is no will from North Korea to find new allies because this one is a strong one. Lee Jae-myung said that organizing a meeting between North and South Korea would be, I'm quoting him, very difficult. So, he's a pragmatic. We've seen it, we've said it a lot in his politics, and it's showing here as well that he knows that there will be hardship and it's not the same situation as it was in 2017. But what could get Kim Jong-un to the table, I would say the main thing would be to build up gradual trust, and that's what's being done with the fact that the loudspeaker are being turned off, the fact that Lee Jae-myung administration is trying to get more dialogue. So, seeking discussion, finding agreements in smaller points like military agreements again would probably be the best way to try and get North Korea back to the table of discussion, not on the main point like denuclearization. And I would say, obviously, probably the help of the United States.
Right. And speaking about the help of the United States, there's a bit of debate about whether South Korea will be able to de-escalate tensions here on the Korean Peninsula without the help of the US. Keeping in mind, of course, Mr. Trump's busy agenda with regard to tariffs and, of course, other global matters. What have you been hearing on the ground?
So as you mentioned, there is growing debate about whether South Korea can lower tensions with North Korea on its own without U.S. support. President Lee Jae-myung has made it clear that he believes South Korea is strong enough to lead the way. He recently pointed out that South Korea now ranks as the world's 5th largest military power. Lee says this level of strength gives the South Korea confidence to respond firmly to North Korea's provocation, while still creating space to reopen dialogue with North Korea. At the same time, President Lee Jae-myung emphasized that the U.S.-South Korea alliance remains solid, and that close cooperation with Japan and improved ties with China and Russia are all part of a balanced, practical approach to diplomacy and peace. That said, most experts still believe that de-escalating the North Korean threat without U.S. support would be extremely difficult. According to many experts and scholars, military deterrence, especially the U.S. nuclear umbrella, is still essential in preventing real escalation. So while Seoul is taking the lead on trust building, trying to ease tensions by halting loudspeaker and restricting the balloon launches, this step don't really replace hard deterrence. This general view is that South Korea can help manage tensions, but lasting stability still depends on strong alliances like U.S. support. There is also the option of bolstering South Korea's own defense. There are many discussions about that, but long-range missiles, defense systems, and maybe even nuclear capabilities. But experts warn that developing independent capabilities is hard, expensive, and could raise arms race in the future.
Right. Chloe, beyond the U.S., who perhaps are the allies that South Korea can rely on to ease tensions here on the Korean Peninsula, do you think?
Well, I would say that that would be the countries that are equally interested and concerned with the situation. So the main allies that South Korea could find are countries that are in the Indo-Pacific region. So I would say Japan, obviously, and obviously Japan would be one of the main powerful allies. Lee Jae-myung administrations already know that. Lee Jae-myung himself have already said that the alliance with the US and Japan is one of the main points that has to be emphasized. I would also say probably Australia, New Zealand, we could see those ones working together. We've seen that Australia especially has been showing a bit of interest into the global stability of the region. The question would be, would there be any strong allies in Europe? From my point of view, I would say it's hard to say for the moment because there's too much going on in Ukraine. Europe itself is kind of dependent on what Donald Trump is going to do. We've been speaking about the NATO, about what could happen. So because of all these points that are kind of unbalanced at the moment in Europe, I'm not sure how many countries would be strong and reliable allies at the moment. But still, we've seen like Australia and South Korea have been invited repeatedly to the G7. They've been invited to the NATO. So that shows that there is a will to stay alert on the question of what's going on in the Korean Peninsula for the European nations, which is a good point and something that has to be kept this way and probably nurtured in the future. And then one that would be maybe more of important one, but has to be done with regard of what the US would say, is China, obviously, because we know that China, they also want the peninsula to be peaceful, because the more stable the situation, the easiest for the economy it is. So it's good for business, and it's also good for their area of influence, because we know that since North Korea is turning more and more to Russia, China is kind of losing a bit of influence on North Korea, and we know that the Chinese government would like to, be able to stay strong in the area as well. So that could be also a way for South Korea to discuss with them and try to find an ally there as well.
Right. That actually reminds me of something a scholar was saying, that peace on the Korean Peninsula would be profitable for all the countries around it as well. Right, Soram. Moving on, Soram, what's the latest with regard to South Korea's plans to repatriate 6 North Korean fishermen, I understand? Could you tell us a bit about this incident?
So earlier this year, 6 North Korean fishermen were rescued by South Korean military crew after their boat crossed the northern limit line. This happened on 2 separate occasions, one in March and one in May. The men were found in poor condition, falling in a small wooden boat in both East and West Seas. After bringing them onto the shore and conducting a series of interviews, South Korean authorities confirmed that all 6 clearly expressed their desire to return to North Korea. The plan now is to repair their wooden boat and send them back across the border as early as this week. Seoul says it's a purely humanitarian gesture aiming to honor their wishes quickly and safely. However, here's the important background. Communication between North Korea and South Korea has been cut since late 2023. North Korea declared South Korea as hostile state, so formal lines are silent at this point. Despite that, Seoul notified Pyongyang through the UN channel, offering to return the fishermen and likely launching the boat near the northern limit line, even without a direct response from North Korea. This is the first repatriation under President Lee Jae-myung. This reflects his government's commitment to handle humanitarian issues with care, even in the absence of inter-Korean communication. The move fits his broader strategy of reducing tensions and reopening limited humanitarian contacts. Seoul emphasized that this is not a political gesture, but rather a basic humanitarian act that respects the individual's wishes. Officials have also made it clear that all 6 fishermen were screened for possible defection or security risk and non-expressed unintent to stay in South Korea.
Right. And also, Chloe, last week, a North Korean man, this time, he appeared to have an intention to cross the border because, according to authorities here, he crossed into the South Korean border last week. And I understand that the military here have him in custody. Could you tell us a bit more about this particular incident? And do you believe such defections, Chloe, from North Korea to South Korea, look to perhaps complicate efforts by Seoul to engage with Pyongyang?
Yeah, so he was taken into custody by the South Korean military through when he was taken from the demilitarized zone, so the zone between the two Koreas that is not allowed, not open to civilians. He's identified as a civilian when he was taken into custody by the army. So what we know for now is from the South Korean army is that the man crossed in the very early morning Thursday last week, and so he was in the very heavily fortified area, and that's probably the part that make it most interesting is that usually when people want to defect from North Korea, they are doing it through China because the frontier there, like the demarcation line, is not as strongly surveyed. It obviously is watched by guards, but it's not as strongly as heavily fortified as it is between the two Koreas. So he was spotted actually in the midwestern part of the border by the military surveillance, and then troops were dispatched to guide him and get him safely on South Korean side. It took from the moment they saw him on the videos to the moment they were able to take him into custody 20 hours to guide him. So that's, we can realize how long it was. And what the army said there was no reaction or no movement from the North Korean troops on the time they were doing the rescue mission, the guiding mission for this man. So as I say, he's now in custody, and we'll see he's probably going to go through all the screening. As he identified as a civilian, it's probably defection, but we still have to wait and see. And obviously we know that this process can be a bit long and a bit secretive, obviously, for the security reasons. Then could that make it any harder to, get engagement with North Korea? I would say that it's hard to tell. From my point of view, I would say not really, because people have been defecting forever between the two Koreas. People have been coming to South Korea. Did it slow down the Sunshine Policy efforts? I'm not sure. I know that what could, and we've seen it already, what can make North Korea unhappy and quite furious at the South Korean side is mostly when South Korea is making efforts, and that will be civilian, but making effort to send some leaflets against the Kim regime into North Korea. We've seen it last summer, actually. It was 1 year ago now that North Korea was really unhappy with the balloons sent by some civilian groups who were sending balloons with anti-Kim regime propaganda leaflets. And in retaliation, they were sending like trash balloons. That lasted quite a few months. So we know that in those times that they are not happy with South Korean incentive to get people to defect. But the fact that people are defecting, I'm not sure if it will change anything more on the state-to-state relationship.
Right. Hopefully you're right, hopefully. Soram, perhaps then another challenge for the Lee Jae-myung administration is the balancing of its desire for dialogue with North Korea and the international community's concerns over North Korea's rampant human rights abuses. Now, I am aware that Reuters recently covered UN concerns, the latest UN concerns with regard to these violations. Could you tell us a bit about them?
So South Korea faces a tough balancing challenge under President Lee Jae-myung. On one hand, his administration is pushing to reopen dialogue with North Korea. On the other, there is growing pressure from the international community to confront the North Korea's serious human rights abuses. A recent Reuters report highlights the concern. 10 years after the UN's investigation into North Korea, James Heenan, the UN's human rights representative in Seoul, confirmed that people in the north still face public executions, forced labor, constant surveillance, and extreme hunger. Some defectors even told investigators that they would rather face a war than stay under that kind of condition. And things have gotten worse since the COVID-19, with tighter border controls, harsher punishments, and fewer chances to escape. The UN is now urging that any future engagement with North Korea must include clear human rights demands. At a press conference marking his first 30 days in office, President Lee Jae-myung briefly addressed the human rights issues of North Korea. He acknowledged that the human rights issues in North Korea is complicated, and he said helping people with humanitarian aid might be a step towards improving rights in the long run. But from my knowledge, North Korea is extremely sensitive about human rights issues. So if President Lee Jae-myung is serious about restarting dialogue with North Korea, he may choose to avoid directly addressing that specific issues. So the leadership has already taken steps to ease tensions, such as loudspeaker and balloon launches. These are seen as gesture of goodwill, but Seoul still faces pressure to speak out, especially on global platforms like the UN. The international community expects South Korea to stand firm on human rights issues.
Right, and very briefly speaking, Chloe, some scholars believe the Lee Jae-myung administration's approach to North Korea, it's quite realistic. What are your thoughts, briefly speaking?
Yes, I would agree with them on some point. What they're saying is that the Lee Jae-myung administration approach is not linked to ideology like it was in the Sunshine Policy, the idea that the two Koreas should reunify. But it's mostly like economical interest. He has been saying that it would be interesting to invest into North Korea, but also that obviously tension in the peninsula would be bad for the economy. We've touched on that already. So I would agree on this part, but there's also another thing is there is a necessity here to be kind of more pragmatic, because there is anyway no interest from the North Korean part for the moment. And there's also a need for South Korea to stay alert, because we never know when the United States and Donald Trump are going to try again and have a meeting with North Korea, and South Korea has to try and be part of this meeting to be able to be at the table of negotiation if it happens.
Right, for sure, Chloe. All right, I'm afraid that's all the time we have today. Chloe, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you.
And Soram, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right, on that note, we end this edition of Press Perspective. We return same time tomorrow, so do join us then. As always, thank you for now.